G'day, folk, and welcome to a very special screening of the Campfire Project live on a Thursday night.
Mine's not around anymore, so I'm in trouble.
I really want to thank the panel for coming together on short notice, and especially about something for me that I feel is extremely important at the moment in Melbourne and in Victoria, and that's communication. With all the different opportunities going on at the minute, and there's going to be a lot more to come, communication is going to be the thing that's going to move us forward to work through this situation. If we haven't got tools of communication...
home, I think.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah? Is it right? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so so communication is the one thing that I feel is going to be our tool that will move us forward. So tonight, I've got with us 5 amazing people that I know communicate better than others. So I would like to welcome them. First things first, we've got Mick Hawes. Please give us a wave. I've mucked up the thing. Mick Hawes is from Builders Business Black Belt and one of Australia puts his name tag on. Thank you, Mick. And he's one of Australia's leading builders coaches. So thank you, Mick, for joining us.
Pleasure.
We've got Russell Reeves. Russell Reeves is a Cert 4 counselling assessor. So Russell brings with him a wealth of knowledge and experience, and is also a fantastic grandfather. And thank you for joining us, Russell.
You got to wake him up before you speak to him.
Oh, yeah, 8:05. Hang on.
I think you might find he's not hearing us at all.
Okay, no worries. Well, you know what? I'll just give me a sec. I'll remove from stream, then I'll bring it back on and see what happens. Okay, brilliant. So, thank you, Russell. We've got Paul Stretton-Stephens, future mindset coach, a brilliant man that knows how to hear people better than anybody I've ever met. I've got Kylie Hutchinson.
How you doing?
Sorry, Paul, give us a wave.
How you doing?
Thank you. I've got Kylie Hutchinson, death doula, who spends a lot of time with people in the end of days, which at that time of life, that's when communication is everything. So thank you, Kylie. Thank you for joining us. And I've got the gorgeous Ellen Stevens, who's got a completely different background. You are in the campfire tonight, who's a facial profiler, but more importantly, is a communication specialist. So I can't thank you guys enough for coming together in such short notice to have a conversation that I think needs to be had.
Excellent.
Communication. In the dictionary, it's the imparting or exchanging of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. I feel in today's society, we use talking too much. I think it's the one form of communication that we try to use and we're not being heard. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to go through my screen. Mick Hawes, if you would like to give us your best version of what you think communication is.
What a great question, Scott Carson. Being a business coach, I've always said it's probably the number one skill for a business owner that you could have, because it can be applied in every single area. Obviously, to me, the first place that you work on communication is with yourself. Like if you really can't figure out what you're thinking and what your feeling means and all of that sort of stuff, and understand your internal communication, you're in a bit of strife to start with. But then from a business point of view, having great communication skills with your team, with your suppliers, with your prospects and with your customers, I just don't know of a more valuable skill. Unfortunately, it doesn't get taught at the time when it probably should be taught. We get told to sit down and listen and don't speak until you're sort of spoken to. And it's not until we're kind of at this age where we figure out we actually need some of this stuff, that we have to go find people, the Stephen Coveys and whatever, to learn how to communicate effectively, and you've got to wanna. You know, you've got to want to learn this sort of thing. And I'm so appreciative of being a part of this to get this message out to anybody and everybody who's listening. Is something that I encourage. I do myself is do time blocks on a daily basis to do something to just tweak and refine your ability to communicate. And when I say communicate, I think my primary focus with communication is just doing my very best to listen, to understand. I wish I was a whole lot better at it. But to me, that's what communication is as a priority, is listening with the intent to understand, not to be heard or anything like that at this stage, but just listen with the intent to understand.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good explanation. Alan Stephens.
I'll add to what Mick's just said, and it is active listening. They say that you've got one mouth and you've got two ears. Well, actually, you've got one mouth, you've got two ears, and you've got two eyes as well. Use them in that proportion. Because when you really focus on the other person, it's not just listening to what they're saying, but it's reading their body language, reading their expressions, being fully engaged in connection with them. And that's when you get the information from them, and then you can communicate back to them more effectively. It also means what they're talking about, asking them if you've actually heard what they've said. Did you really mean that? Is that what you meant? You know, can you explain more? Have I got it right? Don't assume. Because how many times they say it's about 17 seconds when you're talking to somebody and talking about the issues that you've got. It takes them about 17 seconds before somebody jumps in and tries to give you advice on what to do. You know, there's no way you can get the information in that period of time. And in fact, half the time, especially when I'm talking, the length of some of my sentences, as Kylie and a few of the others will know, will go on for ages. In 17 seconds, I haven't even started the sentence. So it is a case of show respect to the other person, because the communication is about, I want to be able to hear them. I want to actually know who they are. And I can't do that if I'm talking at them. Because the thing is, we talk about talking with somebody, but we use the term all the time, talking to. You know, I'd like to have a chat with you. I'd like to talk to you. No, I want to talk with you. Some of the words we're using, we've got to be careful about as well.
There's some liquid gold there already. Talking with you, just change the mindset in which you approach the conversation. That's awesome. Thank you, Kylie. With your experience with death tool and your communication's everything at the end of the day. What does it mean?
Further on to what the gentleman said before me. So it's absolutely listening to understand and not to respond. So when someone's talking, you don't need to listen to what they're saying in order to fix it or come back with the solution. Maybe sometimes it's just listening in order to understand and to hear them. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Because like in your work, that would be the most important thing. End of days, to actually be able to hear and feel heard. I'm sure that would be the thing that would really make someone passing away feel comfortable.
Yeah. And not just the person passing away, the people around them. You know? There's all various levels of grief and levels of people's journey and level of people's acceptance of what is happening. And in my experience, I've found that the person dying is far more accepting of what is happening than those around them. So the person dying may be willing to die, be ready to die, but those around them aren't. So there is a miscommunication about where they're at and what they want at that point. You know, and
I'm actually going to dive into that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that now.
Yeah. It's hearing it where they're at, not to respond, but to actually hear and understand it.
Well, I'm actually going to dive into that a little bit right now before we go too much further, because at the moment in Melbourne, there's people in hospital that cannot see their loved ones. they're locked down. They're on their own. They're completely isolated. Some of them are accepting their fate. What advice would you give to the family members? It's a tough one. This is tough. We're starting out big because it's.
Yeah. My advice to people in this situation is start thinking outside the box. As much as communication over the phone isn't anywhere near it. Like, we all know that when you're face to face in person, that there is a much bigger connection, and it's really hard to get that over Zoom or over a screen, or especially for our elderly that are stuck in aged care facilities without that interaction. And they especially are feeling that I'm wanting, they want that physical touch. Like, they're happy to have your presence in the room and have you hold the hand without even talking in a lot of cases. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation. And we're seeing, and the doulas, we the doulas are seeing so many cases of people that are just desperate for that connection. And you've got to start thinking outside the box. You've got to start finding ways. Channel 7 ran a story tonight actually on an aged care facility in Croydon that has got a shipping container. It was built by one of the residents' grandsons, a shipping container with like a little lounge room set up in either end and a glass panel in the middle. So residents can go in one end and the visitor can go in the other, and they can talk. And it's, beautiful, not an easy, not a cheap alternative, but we've got to start coming up with something. And, I get that we're locking them down for safety and safety of everyone. But there is a mental health component that comes into that as well. We're locking them down for their physical safety while sacrificing their mental health. And you've got to weigh that up for every single person, what they want. Yeah, it's huge. So advice to anyone going through it is start thinking of ways and trying to find it. And you can do it over Zoom and you can do it over the phone. It's not the same. And it's just really hard. And, for me, I'm advocating pulling people out of aged care facilities and bringing them home, at least for the interim.
Yeah, nice.
If you can, yeah.
Yeah, good on you, because they're bringing people home, bringing them back to the heart. So, thank you, Kylie. Paul.
Hi. Well, communication for me, it's everything. There's a recent study in the University of Missouri that 70 to 80% of our waking hours involves some form of communication. 70 to 80%. Just think about that. Now, of that time, we spend about 9% writing, 16% reading. I think it was 30% speaking, but it's 45% listening. And that echoes what everybody else has been saying so far, doesn't it? About how important listening is. And not just listening for the sake of listening, but listening with intention, being present when you're actually with somebody and hearing their conversation. I noticed that one of the guys here, sorry, I forgot your name there, works with businesses. When you're around the boardroom table, mobile phones out, devices out, gone, off, and really listen to the individual who has the platform at that moment in time. If you don't, you're only placating them. It's only a cursory form of listening. And I noticed Alan mentioned about active listening. And I'm significantly sight impaired, and I used to class myself as an active, deep listener years ago, but now I'm a super deep listener. And that serves me well. And the people I work with, I help them become super deep listeners too, and it serves them well. And that's not just listening to for the sake of listening. It's listening to every single word. It's listening to the language patterns. It's listening to what's not being said. It's listening to their breaths. It's listening to everything. And yes, it takes practice. And I've been forced into a situation when I can do that. But anybody can do that with a bit of practice and with some teaching. And I find, I'm not sure about you guys over there, and you ladies over there would know as well about the guys in Australia, but certainly the guys over here, a big problem is the inability to actively listen, the basic form of listening. And that's where relationships break down, and through lockdown, huge problems with domestic violence, breakups, etc., because they've all been forced together. And it's the listening that's the key. Listening first.
100%.
I love that. And I'm going to be a little bit cheeky, Paul, and I'm actually going to ask you to explain your AVK or VAK.
The VAK, well, that's simple. That's NLP speak, and it's been around for a while. It's been adopted by teachers, by psychologists, by a multitude of industries. There are three predominant representational systems. In a nutshell, we'll explain it in a nutshell: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And we all possess all of these. We're all visual in some aspect, we're all auditory in other aspects, and we're all kinesthetic, touchy-feely, sensitive in other aspects. But there are predominant features with each one of us. Somebody might be highly visual maybe artists, for example. They're highly visual in nature, but they might be visual in their language patterns too, and the way they perceive things and receive information. And if somebody's really into music, they may be very auditory by nature, but also in their normal life, they respond better to auditory type language. And somebody who's kinesthetic, who's really sensitive and touchy-feely, they respond to language of that type as well. So I could say, well, that sounds good to me, as a very basic example here, and the auditory person will switch on to that particular sentence. Or I feel we're on the right track here. Somebody who's kinesthetic, and I'm now matching my language patterns to the person that's receiving the communication. I'm not expecting them to do that. I'm doing that. If I want to be more effective in my communication, I'm the one who needs to be more flexible and fluid. And if somebody's visual, you could say, well, yeah, I see what you're saying. The future's clear, the future's bright, and you're using those particular language patterns. There's more to it than this, but in the time we've got here, this is just the basic nuts and bolts.
Brilliant. Thank you. And it looks like we've lost Russell. It's a bit of a shame, but we'll see how we go. This is the one thing for me that I've learned, and actually been lucky enough to learn from this panel. So many different ways to communicate. Alan, facial features. If you could give us a little bit of a clue into what we can see, I hope Russell's back in facial features that are going to really help people.
So very quickly, what the facial features represent, that if you lift weights, you're going to build muscles, in your body. At the same time, everything you feel inside, you express outwardly. So the expression's on your face. So if you think in a certain way over and over again, you're going to create ridges and crevices on your face, which are a history of how you like to think and process. So there's about 68 traits that I'm working with that in your face that will tell me how you like to receive information and all the rest of it, but probably not really the forum here to go into that in any depth. I think back to what Paul was saying about the visual, auditory and kinesthetic, that's something that everybody can focus on right now, because listen to the sentences themselves. As Paul had said, if I had said, well, can you see what I'm saying? That sounds like a stupid statement. To somebody who's visual, yeah, I can see what you're saying straight away. So listen to their language, and then once you understand their word patterns, if they're using visual, auditory or kinesthetic type things, feeling words, etc., then use those sort of words back to them. They'll get into a deeper conversation a lot sooner.
Brilliant.
Alan's just explained why I look perpetually confused. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, I think don't worry. I will have to wear glasses to hide from Alan these days. So, Russell, how are you, mate? How's our connection now?
Been having trouble.
Yeah, that's okay.
Trouble.
We'll go with it for a little bit, and we'll see how we go. If we can't get it good in the next 15 minutes.
I'm working at the moment. You're seeing me at the moment?
Perfectly, and can hear you quite clearly too.
Not working?
No, we got you.
Okay. If it doesn't work, I'll try and get back onto my phone.
We might go back to your phone if that's okay, just to see how we go, because that was very robotic. So if we could give that a go, that'd be fantastic. Thanks, Russell.
So I've missed a part of it, but obviously, taught this.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Here we are
Thanks
having
for
a
Russell, I kicked out of the studio.
You just pulled the eject lever.
Just accidentally. I don't know what happened, but this is all part of it, right? So this is what we're talking about, communication. We're all talking about listening. We can't hear. It's at the point where we need to be able to hear, to understand what he needs to say. Russell's just a wealth of knowledge, but we can't quite hear him. So we've got to find another way to hear him. This is going to be a great opportunity to see whether or not we can possess it. Yeah, if Russell can get on his phone, we find another way to hear what he has to say. So I'm just working through a few things, and at the moment, one of the things for me that's really big, and I can only talk about my life, is talking to people, right, versus talking at people, because I'm finding at the minute everybody's emotions are so high that they're talking at them. They're not talking with, as we sort of discussed earlier. They're talking at them. Have you got any advice on how to slow people down from talking at people? Because it's something for me that it starts you off on the wrong foot. So I'm going to start with Mick, if that's okay. Put you under the pump.
Yeah. If I'm understanding the question, you're asking how we slow people down to so they're just not talking at people.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Very much so. Thank you for translating my English into the language that other people can understand.
Yeah, no, I think they were the exact words you said. I'm still trying to work out what you mean.
Yeah. So, okay. So basically, I'm wanting to give people, because we talk at people, right?
Yeah.
Without letting them being able to hear what we have to say. So how do we go into a conversation and start it so that we can be heard? So what I'm trying to say is, how do we slow down so that we can actually take that process on?
Oh, well, what a tough question. But I think
Yes.
the challenge with it is I guess understanding the system, the process, whatever you want to call it, which I first sort of learned with Habit 5, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then there's a great book by Hugh Mackay, Why People Don't Listen. And the fundamental principle behind both of those teachings, the way I see it, is people tend to listen to those who listen to them. And so if you ever remotely want to be listened to, you must become a master listener so the person feels fully understood, but not only what they said, like I've fed back to you, Scott, the words you said, but I had no idea what you meant. So that wasn't a very good example of what I'm talking about. But
so I disagree with that, because I think it is, because you didn't understand what I had to say, and you come back for clarification. I think it's literally that simple. I think it's literally that simple. If you don't understand something, you come back to me for clarification.
That's it.
Yeah, but I think that if you've got any hope of ever being listened to, you've kind of got to become that master listener and have that person feel understood. And I think one of the better analogies I heard, it might have been Stephen Covey or whatever, and it's like if all of the air's been sucked out of the room, if the person if they can't breathe, then you're giving them advice through the window. It's like they're just not paying any attention, and it's not until you sort of put your fist through the window or whatever to allow them to breathe that there's any chance of them ever listening to your advice. Like they're just trying to survive, and I think that communication in most parts, in my experience, is so poor that people are suffocating. If you know, to use that as an analogy, they can't breathe. They're not being heard. And I talk to so many people and teach them a lot of these skills. And like one, for instance, is like this really basic thing called the Japanese silent pause. I think I've talked to you about it. And it's like when you're in a conversation with somebody, you don't speak until there's been now go. And like, it's so hard to let that space happen for most people. But it has to be, you just have to do that. And I get so many people saying, oh, there's some of the people that I talk to, there's no way that I can leave a gap. Like they just never, ever stop talking. So if I don't talk over the top of them, I'll never get my, bit in. And it's like, well, my perception of what's going on there is that poor person that keeps talking and keeps talking and keeps talking. The reason behind that is they've never, ever felt heard. And it's their only process to just try and struggle to get heard. And if you can invest the time and have that person feel like they've been heard and understood, and you've given them zero advice, you haven't fixed anything, you'll be the knight in shining armor for them. You'll be the person that rescued them from the room, or that rescued them from drowning or whatever. It's kind of like that, and so many people need it and hardly anyone gives it.
Perfect. And thank you for getting around my question. I'm actually going to flip the question a bit because it's just going to be complicated, which is part of the conversation, part of this working through things, So I'm going to pass over to Alan, if that's all right. I'm going to ask Alan, people at the moment are at capacity. Their thoughts are taking over their patterns. How do you enter that conversation with somebody? Sorry, how do you...
Alan's frozen now.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So people, is Alan gone too now, is he?
Yeah, I'm back.
Russell's
I'm
here.
back.
Okay, Russell, how are you? I think it must be something dodgy going on in Newcastle. So I'm gonna flip that over to you, if that's all right, Paul. If people are at capacity and they've got no headspace, how do you best find a way to communicate with that? Because at the moment, that's where we're at.
Well, tough question, because it's very much on an individual basis here. Because if somebody's at full capacity and can't receive information, no matter what you say to them, it's not going to get through, is it?
Correct.
You've got to be available, and this is one of the other keys here. You have to be available for communication. And if you're with somebody who's at full capacity and they're not open to receive it, then you have to be there and be available for when they are open. You have to bide your time. You have to wait. You can't force it on somebody because it just doesn't work. It goes in, comes out. It doesn't even penetrate. So one of the easiest ways to have good communication is simply be available. And I know for a lot of people that they'll worry about, because they've never communicated this way before. And that's a concern for a lot of people, but you are able to provide signals. So imagine that you're husband and wife at home, for example, and communication has never been really good lately for whatever reason, but you want to communicate. You've decided, you've mentally rehearsed, you've practiced, you've worked out what words you're going to say, etc. But the recipient isn't used to you communicating. So what do you do in that scenario? You provide signals. So if you're a person who's never helps wash the pots or dry the pots or volunteer for anything in the home, domestic-wise or anything like that, do that. It can send a signal that there's a difference in the air. And the recipient is alerted to the fact there's a difference in the air. And that can open channels. Those subtleties, those small actions can open channels for communication. I'm not saying, okay, let's just dry the pots and let's engage in conversation straight away, straight in, the deep end. No, take your time. And this takes time if you've not been used to communicating on that level. But one of the real things here, and I mentioned this now, mental rehearsal, because athletes practice, they visualize, they mentally rehearse what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Now, if you're an athlete on the track, you're going to look at mentally rehearsing every particular scenario here. The winds at your front, the winds at either side, the winds at your back. Your competitors got more points ahead of you than you anticipated. You know, somebody said something to you. All these things that can affect your performance. Now, on the day, because they've mentally rehearsed hundreds of times, they can react to whatever happens on the day as best as possible. That's just the same as engaging in conversation. If you're not used to communicating and your recipient is not used to you communicating, you need to sort of gauge what their reaction may be in certain scenarios. You're not going to cover every base, but at least you can mentally prepare, and you can prepare yourself in order to respond. And I think that's really important. So be available and mentally rehearse.
I absolutely adore that. And that's pretty much what I was trying to get to, the fact that when people are at capacity, we've got to find other ways of communication, because just doing the dishes when you don't normally do the dishes is actually letting that person know that you're in their thoughts and you're there for them. And right now, it's a simple little thing, but it's not. It's actually big. And if you keep up those things, doing the 1%ers, that will open the door for communication. And I'm only speaking from experience at the moment, but with everything that's going on in Melbourne, trust is something that's not readily available. There's no clarity, there's no certainty in our lives. So little triggers. If you're going into a conversation and you feel somebody being triggered, go and do the dishes or something like that. Save the questions for later, because that space that you were talking about before, Mick, space is something that we should be giving innately, especially when it comes to trouble. So I'm going to pass over to Russell now, if that's okay. Russell, your experience. We'll get this. You're in with us, Russell. Yes, we're going to win. So, look, awesome. Thank you so much for persisting, and which for me is one of the things in good communication. Persistence doesn't always work the first time, but if we stay in tune and we keep going at it, we'll get there. I'm after some liquid gold, Russell. People at the moment are hurting. What's some advice for people on other ways to communicate when they're at capacity?
Well, of course, I've missed some of the conversation, so maybe I'll repeat some things.
That's okay.
But
you're reinforced.
So where to start and where to finish? There's a whole lot of things happening in our society, and particularly in the society of Victoria at the moment. You've touched on the uncertainty and where people are heading. Some are fighting their battles individually. Some are family, and I'd encourage the family ones to hang in there and realise that they have a responsibility to look after their family and to find whatever means that they can to resolve their communications with their family. There was, I don't know who said it before, but I was going to talk a little bit about the kind of visual and auditory. In counselling, I look for those cues in regards to people's language and how they talk to me. So maybe some of the people who are experiencing things may listen to how their partners, their children are talking. And the clues that I have in counselling is that some people talk sound language, and they talk about this sounds like this, or I can hear this, or they talk in that sort of language. Others, the visual ones, might see things. I can see this happening. I can see that there's going to be an end to all these problems. And then, of course, the auditory ones are listening to things, and kinesthetic ones are doing things. So it just depends on where you are, what your beliefs are. There are people that have strong beliefs, whether they're family beliefs or their ethnic beliefs. These all have a bearing on how they're going to survive these things that are happening. This is unprecedented. What's happening with people, particularly in Victoria at the moment, and we're experiencing in small. I know that from my own experience, my frustrations when we had lockdown was not being able to see my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. So all these things have impact. So the only thing that we can do is to try and keep the best way we can in communicating with one another, and just hang in there. It must end, but the other thing that I would add to that is that one of the things in my counselling experience was dealing with grief and loss. And sometimes we just think of this as being death, that we have grief and loss. But no, we have grief and loss when we've lost our jobs, when we've lost our communications, and this is just an impact that we have. But we can get around it. We need to look at our values and how we deal with life, how we deal with our families, and just get closer and closer to families, and reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out to people and grab hold of whatever you can to communicate with one another. There's so much that we can do and spare ourselves. You know, it's not the end. Yeah, we will come out of it.
Yep. We definitely will. Like throughout the years, we've been tested completely, and the mere fact that we're here right now means we've got 100% success rate of surviving. So I think that might be
lost again.
So, well, good. Okay, yeah. So in that, right now you've got people in marriages that are finding it really difficult to communicate. It's a real struggle. You got mums with kids, and they're sort of disagreeing a bit on the way they're parenting because they're not really there together most of the time. Normally one parent's looking after the kids and then the other parent's looking after the kids. So now they're co-parenting with a slightly different parenting style, and it's bringing up some pretty big things. So I would like to hear from Alan, if possible, what advice you have to people whom are having that a domestic opportunity where the kids are involved and they're not quite aligning. What advice would you have to people in that circumstance?
Well, first of all, my apologies. It looks like my landline died, so I've had to go and get my laptop, turn it on, and get onto my phone and hotspot. So it looks
I'm just
here we are
having
having a talk
the bush of the house.
Well, this is the here we are talking about communication, and we're having a hell of a time with the internet tonight.
Sure are. We've got the grubs, Alan.
We certainly have here in Newcastle. I don't know if it came over from your place to mine or what. I don't know, but there we go. But the whole thing is, what we really need to realise is everybody is different. There's no two people on the planet who are the same. There's no such thing as a certain number of personalities. 7.7 billion people on the planet, 7.7 billion different personalities. And so being able to understand the other person, they talk about it's important to be able to, you ask people to treat you the way that you would have them treat you. But really it's a case of treat other people in the way that they would have you treat them. In other words, talk to them in their style. Before I went offline, we talked about the visual, auditory, kinesthetic and talking in their particular language terms. But it's understanding your child is going to have different styles of taking information and processing that information. And you might think that I've got 2 or 3 kids, they all should be the same because they came out of the same factory. No, they're all going to be different. Because we are the sum of all of our experiences. Everything that you experienced at the time that in your life, before that point, at the time you conceive a child, is in their DNA. Then you have another child later on, there's new information in the DNA for that child. This is why all of our kids are different. And so understanding how each child likes to take information and how they need to be spoken to and talk to them in that particular way. So the more that you can understand, and again, we're coming back always to putting your focus on the other person. Making sure that you understand them more effectively, and then they'll understand us. Because if we're talking, it's like having 2 radio stations and your receiver and your transmitter are on different frequencies. You're not going to connect. And we've seen that tonight with the internet, the way it's gone up and down. A lot of people have communications just like that. They're not connecting with each other. So you've really got to take some time out, listen to the other person. We've listened to the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, but listen to the amount of information they give. And if they give only a small amount of information, you know that they're fairly concise. So if you give them a lot of information, it's overkill. And they're not going to listen to you. They're going to switch off. So you really got to understand the other person in the way they like to take information in, how they then like to express it, and how they like to be treated as well. And if you do that, then you've got strong communication.
Yep. No, brilliant. Thank you. I'm just going to pop up a comment now that's just come in. Shares is someone who lives locally to me, and the second lockdown is harder. When walking before, I noticed just saying hello broke the mass separation we were all experiencing. Making sure we all say hello, commenting on their dog, it helps us connect. I can tell you right now that walking around now is really difficult. I'm a guy who runs around with a smiley face on everything. I've even produced these. Just so I can present a smile. I've been getting around with that on today, and people still aren't engaging with me. That's a concern. For somebody who is I just love seeing smiles on faces. It's really hurting at the minute, and it's something that is really starting to worry me. We're only a week and a half in to the second lockdown.
See, I think that's given. Sorry. It's going to say, I feel like it's just given so much uncertainty because we don't know where we stand. We come out of it, we go back into it again. I think it's the fear of, well, how long is this going to go on? And is this going to be repeated over and over? And I think that's in the back of a lot of minds.
Paul, you're not.
Yeah. Oh, well, it occurred to me the other day we're heading into 6 months of this. Like this six months. You know, we started in March. And I thought I saw something and I thought, oh, that was 3 months ago. And I thought, no, that's not. That's March. Early March was when I pulled my son out of school. And now it's and then we're saying, well, we're not out, we're still got to go back in. We're like, are we going to have how much? And that is mentally draining, not knowing when it's going to end. That you go, okay, well, all right. It's like basic level work, and you go, okay, I've got 8 hours of work to do, and half an hour before you're due to finish, your boss walks in and goes, I really need this, and you've got to, and you go, okay, I can't. I'm mentally checking out, mentally winding down. You've got half an hour worth to go, and your boss says, oh, this is going to take 2 hours, and I need it done. And you're just like,
that's going on at home environments at the moment, where people are trying to work from home, and that environment of pressure is actually really putting a lot of pressure on the home environment. People are trying to teach their kids from home that aren't teachers. They're having to learn new skills. Yeah. My big thing at the on top of trying to hold down their own job, they're doing a teacher's job, and they're trying to run their house, and they're trying to be productive and keep their mental health going for everybody, and learn new skills and coordinate all of this, and the financial pressures that are on everybody. This is massive, massive. What advice would you give to somebody in that situation, Kylie? You have to find a way that's a healthy way to let some of that out. Screaming at the kids isn't ideal. Eating junk food and drinking isn't ideal. There are healthy ways to handle it. If it's meditation, walking the dog, or yoga, and actually for me, it's not judging myself. You know, my alarm goes off every morning and it says get up and do yoga, and I go, not today. I'm not gonna. I don't wanna. It's cold and I don't really want to. And then I go, okay, I don't have to, and I'm not going to beat myself up for it. There is enough pressure from everyone else. If I don't do it today, I'm going to miss it.
And that's all right. Maybe I might do it later. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. But there's enough pressure from everyone else beating us up about what we're supposed to be doing. Just be gentle with yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you. Paul, I'm going to ask you the same question. What advice do you have to people in that situation?
Well, I think Kylie's really hit on it well. I think self-care is paramount. You know, because there's only one person going to look after you, and that's you. Now, if you've got responsibilities, if you've got kids, you've got a wife, you've got a husband, whatever, you need to look after you first. You need to put time aside for you. And I think it's a good idea when you sit in a family setting where you can sit down together and talk over building a routine that's acceptable to everybody in the family. And that includes me too time. You know, everybody needs their own space. Everybody needs social interaction, but that individual space, whether it's half an hour in the bath with candles and music going on, you know, as long as you can escape and you're undisturbed and you can replenish and recharge your batteries, and everybody else understands that. And you might have a teenager and say, okay, you go for an hour in your room and listen to your music, you know, whatever. Nobody's going to disturb you. You do what you have, your space. And if everybody understands that within the family, I think that helps a lot. But what comes with this is the whole theme of this is communication. You know, you need to communicate with your family members to do that. And seek first to understand. So understand what the needs are of everybody. Once you can understand, because a lot of people only listen with the intent of replying, don't they? So if you listen with the intent of understanding, you're on a whole new playing a whole new game here. And if everybody starts to do that in the family, you can then take the time for self-care and then build it up as you go on and respect each other within the family.
Beautiful. Thank you. So self-care and taking understanding something that in itself isn't an easy process for a lot of people, because you are involved in your own stuff. So what are the kind of questions you would ask somebody to actually learn to understand them?
Well, if you've got kids, for example, you can say, look, I understand you're not seeing your friends. Are you communicating with them online? Are you calling them? Are you sending them text messages, whatever? And what kind of responses are you getting? So you can understand if they're being asked to be, you know, an agony aunt, for example, because that happens with some kids. They get asked to be agony aunts for their peers. And that's added pressure. So you need to understand what's happening in your kids' life, even though they're in your own home, because you don't necessarily know all the messages they're receiving from their peers. Are they leaning on somebody in particular because they're frustrated and somebody else is their agony aunt, or is it the other way around? By seeking to understand this and asking the questions and building that relationship, you can support them better. You can understand them better. Find out what their needs are. Try and fulfill their needs if possible. Maybe talk to the other parents if they've identified somebody else is in need. And this is how we can carry on with our social interaction and our communication. But if you want to keep your family unit functioning, then communication is going to be the key.
So understanding, Alan, thank you for that, Paul. Alan, understanding kids. That's a program that you have, and I think it's phenomenal. And I'm just going to talk out of my own experience at the moment. I think one of the things we could be doing to get our own time is to actually learn something. So to actually jump onto a program to understand and learn how to ask questions is important. But Alan, that's something you do with the kids. What are the questions a parent can ask their kids to try and get a better understanding of the situation, so they're coming from a place of fear rather than a place of fear? Oh, this would be really good advice. Can everyone hear it?
No.
Yeah.
I'm having a great time here.
And then I forgot.
Hang on. That's one
To stop the feedback, Mick sent me a message saying, turn the mic off. I turned the mic off and totally forgot. So,
I'm like,
I'm just amusing myself here in the background. Not a problem.
You're giving us some lip reading skills or something. I'm like...
What it comes down to, again, as I said before, I come in beneath all that again, down at a foundation level. The first thing is to understand the child's learning styles. Even before I ask a question, as I said before, facial features, etc., will tell me the child's personality, how they like to take information and how they need to receive the information to be able to process it properly. Now, on top of that, then I've got their expressions, their body language that give me the feedback as to whether I've got it right. So that's where I normally come in. It's usually someone like, well, Russell, for instance, who with his counselling work comes into that side of it. I work with people like Russell, coming at the foundation level, help everybody understand the thinking styles of each person, and then pass them to a counsellor, somebody who really knows what they're doing, who can then work with the verbal side of things and take them through that. That's when I refer to someone like Russell on that. But as you said, the course that you're doing was all about getting underneath and understanding the child first, and then being able to communicate with the child from that level on.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, Russell, do you want to lead into
that? Well, as far as what I teach my clients, firstly, I look at where they're coming from, and I do a thing called transactional analysis, which is about their ego. And so I find out whether they're in adult mode, parent mode, or child mode. And we all experience this. And so this could be a huge problem with people that are in lockdown situation. They may go into adults, men, women, may go into child mode and be childish. So we need to look at how our modes are and ask questions. And as a counsellor, I ask the how, what, where, when. I don't ask the why question, because the why question makes it so that you don't have responsibilities of what's happening around about you. But setting goals is important. Looking, if you're a man that's out of work, this is a sexist sort of approach to it. If you're a man out of work, you may have been the breadwinner for the family. And so here you are stuck in this situation where you're at home. You are limited in what you do. You might like to go out and have a beer at the pub. Well, you can't do that. And so you're stuck at home. So you need to have a new view on life. And that's where you start asking the questions, how, when, where? How am I going to deal with this? Where am I going to get the resources? When am I going to be able to achieve this? What is necessary to do this? And that's my advice to those who are locked down, is ask the questions, ask where your life is heading. And if you're a family person, well, realise that there are other people in that household that are experiencing the same thing as you. They may or may not experience as strongly as you. Some people, I had one person I heard who thinks it's great. They're at home, they've got their video going, and they're watching all the videos that they've missed out on, and they're binging out on series, and they're having a great time. But not all can do that. For me, I'm retired, but I get out in my yard, and today I was pulling out winter grass. And people say, why on earth are you doing that? Well, I don't like the winter grass in my grass. so you find things to do. You find things that you can repair. You make cakes. You help your children to learn things. There's a lot of kids that don't know how to use a hammer. There's a lot of kids that don't know how to paint. Well, maybe it's time to do all those things. Get functioning. And it's this is not science. This is not rocket science. This is home duties. And there's many things that you can do. If you sit and think, oh, woe is me, the end of life is here, then that's what will happen. The end of life will be here. But while you're breathing and have the ability to interact with families or with people around you, I know that some solitary people don't have that thing going on, but often people who are solitary have means that they entertain themselves with. But it's a sad situation. It's hard, even as a counsellor. It's hard. But that would be my thing. I just ask questions. How are you? What are you going to do? And one of the things that I like to do is to do a SWOT analysis, and you find out the strong parts, the weak parts, the interesting parts, and you find out where they're heading. And but in a program like this, we can only very generalise in what we say. We can be technical, or we can be easygoing.
Well, that's exactly what we're sort of why I've brought today together, is just to try and give people little clues on how to try and move forward, rather than like the best possible way is to reach out to somebody and ask for tools. This is the best what I can bring to people right now as quickly as possible to try and get them through the now. Because, and I think that's fantastic, how, what, why and when. It's a great way to start a conversation. So, Paul, you look like you had something to put on top of that.
Really?
You did. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just thinking on top of that. I mean, there's a couple of things that Russell said there about goal setting for individuals, because not everybody knows how to put a goal together.
No.
You know, and it takes practice, and sometimes you need guidance to do that. So if anybody's got any goal setting advice, I think, you know, the team we've got here understand goal setting completely. So they can contact any one of us, I'm sure, if they're interested in goal setting. On the Campfire Project, I did a piece with Alan as an educational piece about SmartX Plus. They can go there. The goal setting formula is there. And if that helps them, great, you know, so be it. And I think that can help because it gives structure. And some people may need a little bit of guidance, but if you've got a form in front of you with some structure and complete guidance on how to set a goal, follow it, you know, try it. You know, nothing to lose, everything to gain.
If I can just add on that, you just mentioned the talk that you did. You'll find that if you go into the file section in the Campfire Project, you'll find the PDF in there with the details that Paul sent over. But you'll also find the PDF of all the one-on-one talks, and you'll find Paul in there. Just look for his name and you'll find him pretty quickly. It's in alphabetical order. On what Russell was saying before about, I hear the word time keep coming in all the time. And the whole thing is that it's one thing that we do have now. If we're at home, we've got all the time in the world. We're not going anywhere. Whereas in the past, we were always in a hurry and everything else. So we got in the rut of talking to people in a very abbreviated form, very rushed form. Now we're in that place where we've got a lot of time around us. Imagine stopping and listening to your children and getting into a conversation with them. Allow them to speak. That's how you'll really find out what they really want and everything else. As Russell said, use those, when, where's, how's, etc., for them to be able to communicate. Keep the conversation simple at first and listen to the way in which they respond back to you. You'll soon work out whether they're visual, auditory or kinesthetic from the conversation. But this is where you have the time to actually give them a bit of space. Remember, as we said before, one mouth, two eyes and two ears. Use them in that proportion, especially with the kids. It allows them to communicate. And you'll be surprised what wisdom and humour is going to come out of the kids. When they feel that they're connected to you, all their behaviour is going to improve.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Can I just throw something in here that I teach the students about communications with children. Children will often say, can I? And they'll persist on some item that they want. And instead of saying no, they'll say, why? Because I said so. Why? Because I'm your parent. And you won't get a resolve. So what I suggest is that for those who are locked down and their kids are asking questions, I would say, well, what benefit will that be for you? Where would you get the money to do that? How long would that take you to do that? Can you give me a plan on how that would happen? So usually by the end of that, they say, oh, forget it.
Yeah,
Well,
because if it was something that they were really wanted, they'll keep going. But it's just frivolous. I'm going to let it go. But you notice in that you're now into conversation. You're talking with each other, not talking at the child.
Yeah.
Look, there's so many different broad spectrums of communication that we can talk about at the minute. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I really should have focused on specific panels on children. And then, because what I'm going to ask the next bloke, Mick, is communication. Yeah, look, you're a specialist at this. Helping builders communicate with their clients in this current time. Clients may not have money. Builders are going to have resources issues. You're going to be finding all sorts of opportunities at the minute. What is your advice to builders or tradies at the moment that are unique situation?
First, before I answer that, there's something that I just wanted to share from about 35 minutes ago, Scott Carson, but I was practicing the Japanese silent pause and there just was never this opportunity for me to say it. So now I've got the talking stick. I'm into it. And it was back when Paul was talking about listen with the intent to understand. And you made a comment, if they're sort of, they're fully loaded, how do we get them, to communicate and all of that sort of stuff. And I just remembered this again, talking about 7 Habits and Stephen Covey, an example of saying just sometimes when a person says, I don't want to talk about it, the real genuine reflection that you understand is that's where it stops and you just be there. And Kylie said sometimes you've just got to be there and you don't try and get them to open up. So genuinely respecting what they said so they really get that you understood what they meant at that time can be a really, really effective method of moving forward. Nothing's happening right now because we're in silence, because that's what was asked. And so they really get it. And there's that potentially just takes one layer off the onion. We're a little bit closer to opening that up. But sometimes we've just got to be super patient and respect what they've just said. Prove that you understood what they meant by not keeping on prodding and poking.
Brilliant.
That's what I have to say.
Yeah, no.
Can I just come in on that a second?
Please.
My wife and I watched a film last night, Military Wives Choir. I don't know if everybody's seen that. And there was a really good piece in that where the military were just about to go off to Afghanistan, leaving their wives. And there was one guy, he was talking with his wife, or trying to, and all she kept saying was, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Because she was fearful. She was angry he was going, etc., and thinking it all through. And you could see that. But she repeated, leave me alone, leave me alone. And he did back off, but he sought clarification. He said, do you really mean that? And then she had this pause. And she said, no. And sometimes you have to go through that process. Have that pause, give them a bit of space, back off a bit physically, and ask again for clarification. Do you really mean that? And if she'd have said yes, then he'd have backed off and gone off and packed up on what he needed to do. But because she said no, that opened the dialogue and allowed them to get closer again before his departure. And that was, okay, it was a film, but it was depicted very well, and it echoed exactly what Mick just said. So I think, that's worth saying.
Well,
thanks.
That is worth saying, because it's, Kenny Mamarella, he's another chap that's taught me some amazing wisdom. And it's, can I speak as a man's point of view? As a man, we always go and try and fix things. We go into it, what can we do? How can we do it? How can we fix this? What can we do? The simple question that I ask, do you need me to listen to this, or do you need me to fix this? Geez, that saved my bacon so many times. And it's such an important thing. So I'm just looking at.
Did you want me to answer the question that you originally asked?
No, okay. I don't actually, because if it's all right with you, Mick, I think that's another conversation.
Jeez, I had a brilliant answer loaded. But anyway.
No. Do you know what? Do you bring it out?
No,
and then I want to open it. No. No, the only reason I'm actually going to hold that question is because I'm actually going to ask you to come back again, and we're going to have a conversation about this, because that's a whole nother side of things that I've had a fair bit of experience with, especially with businesses going under and how to negotiate as best as possible. So I'm going to ask for that to do that another day in a minute.
Perfect.
Just is that okay? Thank you. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, just due to time, and I really want to say thank you to everybody joining me on this short notice, because I think this is just the start of what is going to be a significant event in all of our lives. It's looking like it's going to grow. So as long as we start our conversations, this is where it all starts. It starts by putting your first step forward. On the panel today, I've had some amazing people, but you don't get to go away without giving us your one bit of advice that you can give to somebody right now that's going to get them through to tomorrow, and it's just going to ease a bit of the soul. I'm going to start with you, Alan.
Okay. What I'd point out to everybody is that when people say things, especially when they're stressed, just remember it's more than likely 95% of the times not what they mean. That's why, as Paul said in the that movie, when he asked her, "Is that what you really want?" It's a good way to go, because quite often, if people are stressed, they're going to say things because they're frustrated. They're not really going to be saying what they mean. So take the time out to ask the person, "Well, is that what you really mean?" Explain, describe what is it that I can really do? What is it you're really trying to tell me? And give them that bit of space to be able to give that feedback to you, because that allows them to stop, think, and also cool down a little bit. Because if you don't, you end up running with it. It's like you'll see on Facebook, somebody makes a comment, somebody else makes a comment, and next thing you know, it escalates into an explosion like an atomic bomb, and everybody's involved into it. But the moment somebody steps back for a moment and stops and thinks, everything cools down. So take a little bit of time out, allow the other person a bit of space, and ask them, if this is what I heard you say, is that what you really meant? Is that what you really want me to do, etc.? And give them a bit of space to do that.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you very much. Russell.
One thing I could share is that, again, this is something that I do in counselling when I'm trying to help people set goals. And depending on what they do, and it doesn't matter what industry, and whether they're a doctor, a professor, or whether they're a garbage collector, it doesn't matter. There is a process that they have to do their job. And that's how I get my clients to set goals, by stepping through the processes that they do in their everyday life or work. So there's processes there. So you just need to look at the process. So if you're going to make a cake, or if you're going to make a sandwich, you have to go through a process. You have to get the bread, you have to get the butter out, you need to decide what filling you're going to put it on it, you need to decide how you're going to construct it, and then how you're going to cut it, and if it's going to work or school, how you're going to package it. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a doctor and you're doing an operation, there's a process. If you're a school teacher, there's a process. So that's what I encourage those in lockdown situations to look at what they do in normal life, and use that process as a way of forming goals, so that you're not without a plan, because we need a plan. We always need plans. If we don't have a plan, the old accountant saying, if I can get it right, if you're not planning to win, you're planning to lose. So you have to have a plan.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Paul.
Yeah, to sum it up, I think my top tip really is to listen. Listen with the intention of understanding. Be available, listen with the intention of understanding. And you can overcome so much by just having that intention and mentally rehearse it. Actually mentally rehearse listening to the person you want to listen to. See how you envisage that turning out. What possible scenarios, what possible connotations come out of that? What possible responses come out of that? If you want to dive deeper, we've all spoke about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic earlier on. There's plenty on the internet about this. Learn a bit more. Listen to the your person you want to communicate to more intently. Find out what their language patterns are and start working with that, as we've discussed earlier. But listening is the key. Number one for me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Kylie.
These are incredible times for us. We're being asked to dig deeper and provide more than we ever have. So if you want to communicate and listen to those around you, then I really think you need to look after yourself. Self-care. You can't fill from an empty cup. So take time for yourself. Travel gently with yourself. Take it easy. Don't judge yourself harshly. And just take time out to do whatever it is you need to do that's a healthy way of looking after yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mick.
I think just echoing what Kylie said, but the way I think about it is like stand guard at the entrance to your mind. Make sure that you're putting in the stuff that's going to serve you best. And the one thing that we've learned in our Black Belt group is that when COVID, the first wave hit, we would probably have a group conversation once a week. When it hit, we went to 7 days a week. We would have an open hour conversation with all our members 7 days a week, just so they could talk to each other, just so they could get stuff off their chest, hear from other people's perspectives. That kind of turned into a bit of an opportunity finder conversation. We still continue it on to this day. So we've backed it to 5 days a week. But every weekday for 1 hour, we all get together and we share wins and we share lessons. Like it started off as a Q&A, but the main thing that we do every single day is share wins and share lessons. And so that every day is putting in a decent serve of positivity and hope and opportunity. And what we've noticed is that the people who have been participating in those conversations every day are busier now than they were before we even heard of COVID. Their businesses are thriving more than what they were before they heard of COVID, because, as you said, there are opportunities abound. You mentioned that there are people out there with no money. The majority of customers that would be a customer to a builder actually has more money than they ever have had before, because their travel plans have been canned, a whole bunch of expenditures being canned. They've been spending a whole lot of time at home and they hate their house now, and now they want an extension and new windows and an outdoor living entertainment area and all of this sort of stuff. And our guys, because they've just had a little bit of a shift in focus, rather than perhaps looking totally to do new builds, they're doing all of these extensions, renovations, alterations, new kitchens, new bathrooms, all of that sort of stuff. And they are just run off their feet busy. And that all came about because of our regular conversation. So that's the longest way of me saying over communicate. Keep communicating and hang around with people who will expect more of you, because at some stage you've got to go back perhaps into your family and you have to be the one with the certainty and the strength to provide for them. And you can't keep that up forever. You've got to go and you've got to take a drink from, another group of people who are giving you hope and a better outlook. So over communicate, stand guard at the entrance of your mind. Then you'll be able to help more people.
Brilliant.
Can I add one last thing quickly?
Come on.
With all the voices that we're hearing to outside, be careful about the one voice that you should be really worrying about, focusing on and making sure you're not getting in the way, is the one between your ears. That's the one that's going to take you off track. So communicate with other people outside, but be careful of what notice you're taking of the voice between your ears.
Thank you. I'm going to finish with my little bit of advice, and it's pretty simple. practice doesn't make perfect. It makes progress. Don't have to get it right. Just keep trying. You don't look for the win straight away. That little 1% is a win. So on that, I really want to thank all the panel for coming up short notice and putting this together. Like any good communication, we've only just scratched the surface. We've only just begun to get to the good stuff. It takes time. So on that, thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic night. And we'll see all the campers next week. And I'm going to have a chat to Mick off air because we might have builders one next week, I think. So if that's all right. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Reach out to anybody in the panel. Everybody who's there and available for you to ask questions. It's a time of need. It's a time to give. And everybody's doing that. So thanks very much, campers. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye now.